Hello everyone, and thank you for attending our presentation on using national crime data to improve law enforcement. My name is Gordon Mullen. I'm a Product Development Director out of SAS R&D Scotland, and I'm joined by my colleague Brian Akin. Brian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. And again, as Gordon said, thank you for having us and visiting our presentation today. My name is Brian Akin. I'm a manager in the US-based Justice and Public Safety team. I focus specifically on the customer advisory technical end of the conversation.
Brilliant. So, what are we going to talk about today? There's a short agenda. What we want to do during this presentation is go through a background and a discussion about the challenge that we want to present, a discussion about the RMS state of play. When I say RMS, I mean the record management systems, but we'll get into that definition in the next couple of slides. Then we want to introduce the SAS NIBRS ingestion, which we think is a solution to bringing insight to those RMS systems. And then Brian is going to give us a demonstration of it all in action. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to do to start with was talk about the terms that I'm going to use, or that we're going to use through this presentation. When I say law enforcement agency, I am mainly talking about the police agencies in the United States, including departments, sheriff offices, federal law enforcement agencies. An RMS, and this is what I've put up there, an RMS, this is the FBI definition of what an RMS is in policing. It's really a system for storing, retrieving, retaining and viewing information to do with law enforcement operations and incidents. And NIBRS is the US incident-based reporting system. It's FBI-led, and it is a way of agencies sending up their crime stats on a regular basis. It would be remiss of me at this point. Brian is a thought leader in this area. Brian, my explanation is probably not as good as yours could be from a NIBRS perspective. Give us a short introduction to your view on NIBRS and what it is.
Sure, thank you, Gordon. So the NIBRS system is really the latest advancement and iteration in the UCR collection report, UCR incident report collection system. It's going back to the 1930s in the United States. NIBRS is no longer summary-based, it's incident-based, as the name indicates, but it's also really a connotation around the amount of data per incident that's forwarded from the local police to the state programs up to the national level and the FBI for access and distribution for all kinds of information sources across the entire spectrum of public safety. Each incident that's reported up records 53 separate data elements, and each incident can have up to 5 victims, 5 offenders, and 10 offenses per criminal investigation. So as you can imagine, the data is quite deep and quite wide and very detail oriented, and it offers a major opportunity to advance analytically driven and evidence-based policing decisions across the entire United States. Thanks, Gordon.
Brilliant, thank you, Brian. So that's the definition of terms. Now, there is a challenge presented. We want to show analytics and insight on this RMS data. The challenge is that in the United States alone, there's around 18,000 law enforcement agencies. Now, that size of that amount of law enforcement agencies has obviously led to a plethora of RMS vendors. Now, these vendors can be from sort of multinational large global companies that have delivered RMSs through to independent software vendors building bespoke systems for specific customers. And what we want to be able to do is show customers or potential customers insights from their RMS data. Now you can imagine with that amount of vendors and that amount of agencies, there's a lot of variance. So we have a lot of customers that may have different integration points, the databases in the back end might be different, and they may have different APIs to access that data. So how do we quickly show insight and potential insight from RMS data without having to build bespoke integrations every time we go to these customers? So the solution that we see, we've talked about NIBRS as an instant-based reporting system. We've talked about there's these 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. Now the thing is that most of these RMS vendors and agencies are already sending their data in a standard format. It's XML now. It used to be flat file to NIBRS. I think it's around 14,000 of the 18,000 are already doing it. And all the major agencies are. So in SAS, what we are currently looking at is, can we take those files that RMS vendors and agencies are already sending to NIBRS, and can we ingest them into VIA to show that insight and to gain intelligence on it? Now you can imagine the reason this is very interesting is that all of these agencies and these vendors have already probably performed the ETL or the data management on that NIBRS data to pull it together in that XML package. And then what we're asking is, can we take that and ingest it into SAS, reducing the time to analytics and improving the return of investment and the potential return of investment, and getting insights quicker. So to visualize it, you see here a diagram of three different vendors, each one of them generating a flat file, and these would then get pushed into NIBRS. From there, they'll store that data and bring it all together, and then produce regular reports. What we're saying is, those vendors can take the same, or those customers can take the same XML and flat files that they're generating right now through their data management and ETL processes, push them into our SAS ingestion, which emulates the NIBRS ingestion, and then we can then push that into VIA, and we can use the power of SAS analytics on this data, providing the customers additional insight. So that's how we see taking this large amount of RMS vendors and being able to show analytics on the data that they hold without large data management and ETL changes. We're hoping to have this available this year. We're currently in discussions of what month it will be, but it will be this year. What we've discussed here is, we've talked in relation to NIBRS, but what Brian's going to show you next, once we've ingested that, it's a global opportunity. This isn't just for US customers. The concepts of showing analysis on crime statistics, especially in an age of open data and policing, makes this a global opportunity. And the next thing we kind of want to do is almost have a NIBRS plus ingestion, where we can say to customers or potential customers, you're already sending this packaged information to us and we're showing you insight. If you supplement that with additional data in the same structure, so location, maybe geospatial data, narrative and instant text, we can then do things like geolocation data and location insights and analysis, or using this world-leading text analysis tools that SAS have, identify more insight in your text and instant data. So the next stage of our NIBRS ingestion is we want to expand it out and allow people to send more information and us to perform greater insight on it. So now I've discussed how we are enabling our customers to get their crime data into SAS quicker and easier. I'm going to ask Brian to take over and show us some of the exciting things that we can do with that data once it's in SAS.
So as we've discussed, the CAP solution is intended to give perspective to police departments wherever they are and insights into their data at multi-levels, no matter what visual you're looking at. So this is our overview page. In this page, this is intended to be viewed by non-analytic personnel, non-crime analysts, just users or administrators or executives in a police department, to give them not only numbers that they can use in their day-to-day work, but also perspective. If you think about it, we break each one of these boxes into different visuals, and each one is intended to give multiple versions of that perspective. So a couple examples. Across the top, this is our year-to-date numbers across the various crime categories, and these are perfectly configurable to any category group. This could be all traffic or all crimes, special investigations. It's really up to the agency. This is more of the art of the possible conversation as opposed to what it must specifically be configured to be. In this case, we have the numbers of incidents to date. In this case, 71 murders, 120,000 incidents. And the color-coded circle is intended to give perspective as to where the agency fits in their crime reduction strategies. So just by the red, yellow, green kind of connotation, you can see shootings are going bad, burglaries are bad, larcenies are doing well, overall incidents are doing well. Again, just that multi-perspective approach, just by a quick glance. Everything is filterable, from a time slider on the left to an individual district perspective on the left as well. Everything will automatically adjust based on the filters that are selected. The bottom is just a crosstab between the type of incidents over a 6 or 8 month period, depending upon how much room is on your screen. And again, it's to give you a perspective of the percent change month to month by different offense categories. And then anything over or up or under certain thresholds of change will come up red, yellow, or green as well. This middle visual is one that I'm particularly proud of our work in. It mirrors the work of a mathematician called Andy Wheeler here in the US, who was a former crime analyst, data scientist, and now full-time mathematician. He has a series of published peer-reviewed work that centers around the use of a Poisson distribution to provide more appropriate perspective and views of crime trends over time. And we've infused his methodologies into the models that speak to these normal crime ranges. And I'll blow this out for a second. So right now we're focused on Germantown, and I'll click robberies as a focused area to look at. If I blow it out, you can see this gives us, again, counts and perspective all in the same visual, and I'll explain what that means. So the yellow lines are the actual week-to-week counts, the actual snapshot of activities. And so again, we're robberies in the Germantown district. The blue line is a smoothed over week-to-week average. And the Poisson distribution is really helpful here because it allows us to take events that are of the same type, like in this case robberies, but where the time variation between the events is variable and completely almost random. What one event does not trigger the next event. As you can see, there are time gaps here where there are no robberies that take place, and then there are many where they're very, very close. And this distribution method helps us smooth that out in a more mathematically appropriate methodology. The good part for me is that as just a user here is when I look at this, I have my measurements, my smoothed over average, and then the gray period is the computed average crime rate based on this type of activity. And so this gives me that perspective. I know that my uptrend here, for example, in the middle, it might be an uptrend, it might be something we're going to pay attention to, but I am well within my normal crime range for this area, for this type of activity. And again, not that we shouldn't have crime reduction strategies, but it gives me perspective. When I see an uptrend of this type, I don't need to overreact versus when I see an uptrend of this type way up here. Now we're getting way above what should be considered normal for this type of activity. And this is the time for a very potentially aggressive response versus down here or any of these other uptrends where typically in the past without this perspective, we may have had a stronger response than maybe was appropriate or warranted for a community. But in this case, we have perspective that says, Maybe we just do what we do from a normal response patterns here. But in these areas, we're really starting to get up against the top edge of what normal looks like. This is where we need to do something more aggressive in the community. Again, just a different version of perspective, but I think very insightful at the same time. And again, the side pane is just about case dispositions because everybody wants to know where we are with closed cases, cleared cases, exceptionally cleared cases. And this is a nice, easy, intuitive way to get to it. So this is the second tab of our crime analysis package. This is the crime trends focused area of the application. And it's intended to be one level deeper than the crime overview tab where we started, but not quite full on crime analysis. Again, it's for the non-analytical user. So you can filter on any type of crime category. In this case, we're focused on robberies. The trend bar here shows us the type of robberies that have occurred over the last 4 weeks within our dummy demo database. And it'll also tell us the day of week, the shift, and the time of day when the events are occurring. One of the things that I like about this is it's also a quality control check on the data sourcing. So this tells us hour by day, but the greatest category is when the time is missing. Same thing on day of week. Day of week when the incidents are recorded, but the greatest category is missing. And so this tells us that we have a reporting quality control issue that we probably need to address in our data workflow process. Again, that kind of a double check of perspective. Very quickly, you can see that the majority of these robberies that are occurring over the last 4 weeks are strong arm, street level crimes, non-weapon, which in the central Maryland area, this is usually indicative of street gangs and youth, in particular youth street gang violence. And it kind of also trends correctly by time of day and day of week when these activities are occurring. So moving on to the third tab of the CAP solution is all about detailed crime analysis. Different time sliders, specific event types or incident classifications, location information, normal crime ranges baked into a cross tab as opposed to a chart to give, again, that additional perspective. And you can get down into different elements of the lower level details in an offense. What type of weapon was used, for example, in a robbery charge, what location the event happened at, again, what day of week and what time of day, and then a hotspot map of activities based on frequencies. And again, these are all drillable and filterable. So, right here I'm showing robberies, but if I wanted to do robberies just in Montgomery Village, for example, it's going to be a smaller number. It's going to focus on different levels of activity. You can see a lot of the activities are gun related, but some of them are personal hands and feet. So if I move the robberies that are hands and feet instead of actual physical weapons, again, these are typically indicative of maybe youth violence or youth gangs. You see the majority of the events happen in the residential street area. Wednesday is the popular day of the week when it happens, and about 7 to 10 p.m. is when they are most frequently occurring. Again, if you're going to target offenses or activities, this is the way to drill into the information. Again, perspective, all based on those NIBRS data files that are coming into us from the RMSs. The last two tabs are taking that core NIBRS data, the type of event, the activities and details of the event, and we're adding in some of that NIBRS Plus information that we spoke about earlier. And that NIBRS Plus data, in this case, is the location information. Now in our demo kit, we have actual data that's been rolled up to the 100 block level, just from a sense of not having PII related to a specific incident shown on our screen. But in the case of a real RMS, these addresses would be the actual addresses down to the actual residential or business location. The first of these tabs is a hotspot location analysis that's based on frequencies of events over specific time periods. How many activities happened in how short or large of a time span. We can focus in on individual crime types. Over here on the left, we can adjust the time slider, time crime types. and we can focus in on individual districts. In this case, this is all of Montgomery County, Maryland, and this is showing whatever for the couple of year time period here. This is showing concentrations of criminal activity across all event types. And this shows you if you were targeting, we want to address crime and reduce crime, where is it in its greatest concentration? You would see it's down here. This is Bethesda, Maryland, right up against the Washington, D.C. border. And anybody that lives there, anecdotally, you would understand that this makes sense because this is really butting up right up against D.C. proper versus other areas of the county out here in the green that are much more rural, where there's just less concentrations of activity. You can see some of the areas. This is Germantown and this is Rockville, where there are some concentrations of crime, but this area around Bethesda is definitely where the most activity is occurring during this time period. So if you're focusing a hotspot type response, you would zero in on this area. Now, these geo-boundaries that are attached here, that's also one of the NIBRS plus kind of elements that are attached. We could bring in geo-boundaries from a police department that are district or beat or patrol oriented, or in this case, these are census block levels. So we have tracts and then blocks, which are the smallest unit of geo-boundary available publicly in the United States. These geo blocks or tracts that are being shown can be down to as many as a couple hundred residents in certain municipalities. So again, this is a frequency-based hotspot map to take that event information from the previous tabs and zero in on specific locations where you might want to target responses. So the last tab we're going to discuss today is a variation of the hotspot analysis we just talked about, but in this case, we're going to contrast frequency-based focus of events with harm-based focus of events. What that means is instead of just counting numbers and quantities of events over a certain time period of a certain type and seeing where they're most concentrated, we're going to do that, but we're also going to interpret the type of events and the offenses behind them into the harm that they bring to the communities, or the harm that the community members are experiencing as a result of those activities occurring in their neighborhoods and blocks and communities in general. The way the harm scores are derived, and this is not a new concept, this is an evidence-based approach. There's two versions that are in play now that are generally accepted. One is the Ratliff Harm Index score out of Temple University here in the US, and the other is there's a Cambridge model. They both basically, that's based out of the UK. They both base their harm indexes on a proxy system. And so basically they're taking the offenses involved in an incident, they're proxying the harm by taking the offenses and mapping them to some sort of criminal history offense table or charging table or sentencing guidelines, with kind of the philosophy that the more time an event is sentenced to a prison term, for example, the more harm is attributed to the community as a result of that event. So when you have a lot more serious events with higher prison terms, they then are inferred to be more harmful to the community. And so you can see here in this visual, same basic concept. We have the time slider. We have different categories of crime. In this case, for the sake of expediency, I've pre-checked violent crime and property crime. So it's showing combinations of those two events. The map on the left is all frequency-based, and based on that, again, just like before in the previous map, we're targeting this Bethesda area right up against Washington, D.C. as the place where we want to focus our attention because that's the hot spot of activity. But if I look to the map to the right, you can see I have different areas highlighted where it's not just that one area down in Bethesda, but it's also some of these areas more central to the county or even tangentially up above Bethesda in areas that otherwise don't appear on a typical hotspot map. What this is saying is some of these areas may not have the volume and frequency for events, but the events that are happening there are more harmful to the community. And so that way it gives you a different perspective. On the left, typical traditional hotspot responses, we're going where the numbers happen. The new model, if you want to use this perspective, is we're going to go where the crime is causing the most harm to the community. Two different perspectives, two different approaches. Neither is right or wrong. They both together make a good response strategy. The other thing I want to draw out in this is both of these harm index models, they attempt to remove to the degree possible the bias associated with police responses and historic police data. All of these events that are counted in these maps from frequencies as well as over into harm, they include only events where it's a victim-centric case. So a victim reports the crime. In no case are the police the victim. In no case is society the victim, like for a drug offense. Those are all removed. They also remove, in both harm indexes, they remove anything that is security guard related, like retail theft, where, again, someone's biases may have been involved in targeting an individual that should have been followed up, or reported to the police or arrested. So again, in both cases, they try to remove that bias from the conversation by focusing just on events that are driven outside of the control of the police department. They are responding, reporting, identifying, and hopefully solving and arresting, but they are not choosing to investigate or not, or create an incident or not. Those have been removed from the conversation. Okay, so that's the end of our demo. We'll kick it back for closing. Thank you.
So as you can see from that demo, the art of the possible when it comes to ingesting NIBRS data and moving to a quick analytic path, delivering value and response back to our customers is right in front of us. There's tons of opportunity. And as Gordon said earlier, this isn't just limited to the US-based market. The concept of NIBRS is really based around an idea that you have a standardized data set or a standardized metric in which local agency data is mapped. And that could be anywhere in the world. And as we can take advantage of that mapping, we get quicker to service, quicker to response, quicker to results. Thank you guys for visiting with us today and giving us the opportunity to show you these exciting products and process. And Gordon, you want to close it?
Yes, just echoing what Brian says, very excited about the opportunities that we're seeing in this market and showing on what we can do, working both from an R&D perspective and a justice and public safety perspective. So thank you everyone for attending.